Home is synonymous with safety. You always know that without a doubt, you're comfortable and safe within the four walls of the place that you call home. It's that sigh that you let out as soon as you walk through your front door. It's the comforting and warm feeling when you get somewhere you're familiar with, your home. But some people also have a fear of getting attacked in their own home. It's something you don't want to think about, but you can't lie and say that the thought hasn't crossed your mind. Well, when 22-year-old Katie Sepich went missing from a party in Las Cruces, New Mexico, everyone was on edge. This had to be every person's nightmare, right? What was even more chilling was when her body was found in a remote landfill. But when the police further investigated, they came across a horrific realization. Katie's life was taken right outside of her home. In this confusing case of Katie Sepich, nothing is as it seems, from the crime scene to the suspects and everything in between. What's worse is that it took detectives 3 years to get to the bottom of things. But even when the case was solved, the resolution was not at all what the investigators were expecting. Before we keep going with today's story, I wanted to bring your attention to something that genuinely means a lot to me. So if you've been watching true crime stories for a while now, I'm talking a couple years or more, you'll know that I used to struggle severely with hair loss. Now, I've always had a pretty high hairline, but I'm talking about incredibly thin, brittle hair. I mean, I had to set the lighting up just right so that my scalp wasn't shining while I was trying to film. It was a very serious issue, and hair loss can do a lot to your confidence. It took me forever to find a product that not only helped get my hair to stop falling out, but also get it to come back thicker and stronger. And this is why I teamed up with MDhair, because I know I'm not the only one that struggles with this. Hair loss affects both men and women, and MDhair uses AI technology to analyze photos of your scalp and create a customized treatment plan that's specific to you. They even help you keep track of your new hair growth over time, which is honestly amazing. MDhair offers a 360-degree treatment plan, offering several different products, each with their own unique effects to help not only stop your hair loss, but also heal your scalp and make your hair as strong as possible. I honestly love the products that MDhair offers. I mean, they literally offer every single product that I need. It's genuinely a one-stop shop. Now, the results won't be immediate. It's different for everybody. I personally started seeing signs of hair regrowth in a relatively short amount of time, and I feel like a lot of that had to do with their shampoo and conditioner combo. It helped change the overall feel of both my scalp and my hair in record time, really. MDhair is a product I genuinely care about, and I actually use it every single day, and I mean that. I don't take sponsorships from brands anymore that force me to say things that aren't true. I really mean it when I say that these are the products I used to get my hair back. Right now, MDhair is offering an amazing 70% off your first monthly kit, specifically for True Crime Stories viewers. You can use my promo code TIEKNOTS70 to get this amazing deal, and I promise you will not regret it. And thank you so much to MDhair for sponsoring today's video. But let's get back to the story. Katie Sepich was born on the 26th of December, 1980, in Carlsbad, New Mexico, to parents Dave and Jan Sepich. She was the oldest of 3 siblings, including a brother, AJ, and a sister, Carolyn. Katie was defined as a sweet and caring girl, but being the oldest of her siblings, she had a commanding aura about her. But even though Katie was the type of person to make things go her way, she also looked out for the people that she loved. According to Katie's brother, AJ, she was his best friend and protector, but she was also known for being a bit of a clown once you got to know her. According to one of her best friends, Katie would always make jokes about anything and everything, including herself. She was the person who'd be the butt of a joke, but pulled it off with elegance, grace, and humor. Katie was a confident young lady who was very likable. She was popular, had a lot of friends, and was generally well-liked by those who knew her. At the time of the case, Katie was attending New Mexico University, and she was pursuing a degree in business administration, which sounded perfect for her. She was confident, level-headed, and smart, so this was essentially the perfect career path for her. She lived in an apartment on the east side of Las Cruces, New Mexico, which was close to her campus, and she was also working part-time as a waitress at El Sombrero Patio Cafe, a very vibrant and popular Las Cruces Mexican restaurant. Even though Katie was in college, she still didn't have any idea of what she wanted to do after college. She may have been working towards a degree, but that didn't mean she had a job lined up or anything like that. According to her mom, Jayanne, Katie wanted to change the world, and she had big dreams of doing something big, impactful, and life-changing. She just didn't know what it was yet. At the time, Katie was also seeing someone. It was a fellow university student, Joe Bischoff, and he was majoring in biochemistry. They were both head over heels for each other, and Katie truly saw him as the person she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. Joe was also smitten with Katie's fiery and lovable personality, so much so that he bought Katie a diamond promise ring. It was a beautiful gesture from Joe, and the two were looking forward to graduation, after which they would officially start their new lives. But things didn't go according to plan. See, after getting her bachelor's degree, Katie wanted to stay in university to get a master's degree, whereas Joe moved back to his hometown in Gallup where he got a job. The two weren't broken up, they just had different things to do in life, and they would see each other whenever they got time in their busy schedules. But tragically, Katie wouldn't get to do any of the things she wanted to do. Her plans were put on hold permanently because one fateful night in 2003 changed everything for the worse. On August 30th, 2003, Joe and Katie had plans to meet up in Las Cruces. Katie, her roommate Tracy, and Joe were invited to a college party in a nearby neighborhood that was about a mile from where Katie was living. And the plan was to have an amazing time and then spend the night at the house since it was Labor Day weekend. The next morning, Tracy woke up and was worried to find that Katie was gone. Joe was there, and even Katie's belongings, including her purse, cell phone, and house keys, were in the house. Tracy and Joe searched the house, called up Katie's friends, and even went by Tracy's house to look for her, but there was no sign of Katie. Everyone was starting to worry about her, and that was when Tracy immediately got Katie's parents involved and asked them if Katie had visited. When her parents also had no idea where Katie was, she was reported missing by Tracy and Joe on August 31st. The detectives jumped into action, and they didn't have to look too long because on that same day, just hours after Katie was reported missing, a body was recovered. Some locals were walking by an old Las Cruces landfill site, and they saw something lying on the ground. It was a woman's body, and the investigators were immediately called to the scene. When the police taped off the area and examined the body, it was horrific. The body lay face down, disrobed, and it didn't take a genius to figure out that this woman had been taken advantage of. The body had defensive wounds on the arms and face, and there was DNA in the form of skin under the fingernails. Worse yet, the body had burn marks, which indicated that the perpetrator tried to set her ablaze after the attack but was unsuccessful. The investigators also found tire tracks near the body. They looked fresh, as though someone had used a car to dump her there. This led the detectives to believe that the attack didn't take place in this deserted area. The one likely had her life ended somewhere else, and then her body was dumped in this remote area of Las Cruces. At this point, detectives didn't even know who the victim was, but because Katie had just recently been reported missing, the police had a strong inkling that it could be her. So Katie's dad, Dave, was called in for identification, and unfortunately, the body belonged to 22-year-old Katie Sepich, and her own dad was sadly the one to identify her. Investigators decided to look closely at the people who'd last seen Katie, and two of them were her best friend Tracy and her boyfriend Joe. When the detectives questioned Joe, he stated that they'd arrived at the party together, but after some time he noticed that Katie was nowhere to be found. He didn't think much of it, as he thought that maybe Katie had gone home early, but it wasn't until the next day when Katie didn't show up that he started to get worried. During the same time, a bunch of police officers were tasked with going over to Katie's home and looking for anything out of the ordinary. As soon as they reached Katie's home, though, they did find something weird. First of all, a pair of women's shoes was found discarded below the bedroom window. It looked as if someone had kicked them off haphazardly. Those shoes, you guessed it, belonged to Katie. When the investigators looked at the window above, they were stunned to find that the screen had been tossed onto the ground. The actual window was locked and nothing was broken, but her screen was removed and placed on the ground. So this led the detectives to come up with a theory. They believed that Katie did in fact leave the party, but as she got home, she realized she hadn't brought her keys and ultimately decided to climb up through the bedroom window in order to break into her own home. They thought that Katie was tired and didn't feel like making the walk back to the house where the party was held to retrieve her belongings, and it was during this time the police believed Katie was attacked. But the question remained, who did it? Was it someone Katie knew? Was it a random attack? And why did Katie leave the party? There were just too many plot holes. So the investigators went back to questioning Katie's friends, and that was when they came to know why Katie left the party. Well, the reason was that she was angry at her boyfriend, Joe, because she saw him kissing another girl at the party. The detectives found this immediately odd, not because Joe had now been ousted as a scumbag, but more so because he never mentioned this to the police. And now he had some explaining to do. When Joe was initially questioned by the police, he said that he didn't know why Katie left the party in the middle of the night. But it turns out he probably did know, and it was because of him. So this revelation made the police extremely suspicious of Joe because he'd essentially lied to them. Eventually, Joe did admit that Katie was angry with him, and that was the reason why she left. But he further said that he went to Katie's house to check up on her by driving down her street, and even tried calling her the morning that she went missing. Now, this was also weird for investigators to hear. See, Joe knew that Katie had left her phone at the party, so why was he calling her when he knew that she didn't have her phone on her? The detectives thought that this was Joe's way of covering up his tracks and trying to throw the police off, and this only made them more wary of Joe. The police, at this point, only had one way to prove Joe's involvement, and that was through DNA. Now, it was the early 2000s, and DNA testing is not what it is these days. Still, scientists were able to match DNA at the time, and investigators wanted to get their hands on Joe's DNA to see if he was the one behind Katie's attack. After all, she had DNA under her fingernails and on her body. But what Joe did next made the detectives even more suspicious. He straight up denied giving his DNA for testing. This, to the police, was a clear sign Joe was hiding something. So the police were stuck in the middle yet again. Sure, they had a strong suspicion that Joe was their guy, but the evidence was circumstantial, and the only rock-solid way of proving Joe's involvement was through DNA, which Joe decided not to give to the officers. Katie's family was also appalled by Joe's behavior. This was the man that Katie loved, and now he was being dodgy and uncooperative, and he might have been behind Katie's demise for all that they knew. The Sepich family was going through all sorts of emotions, and none of them were easing their pain. So this was the start of a long search for Katie's killer, as well as trying to convince Joe to give his DNA for testing. The police, in the meantime, questioned every single male in Katie's life and tested their DNA against the DNA found on Katie, but none of them were a match. All the while, officers kept a close eye on Joe for any suspicious behavior, but there wasn't any, which confused the investigators even more. By this point, months passed, but suddenly the detectives found some new information. See, the police were informed that on the night of the party, August 30th, Katie and Joe had been intimate with each other. So the bedding in Katie's bedroom was tested, and they managed to find traces of male DNA on it. When it was sent for matching, the results came back negative. The male DNA on the bed, quite certainly Joe's, didn't match the DNA found on Katie's body. So the investigators thought that maybe Joe wasn't the perpetrator after all, but they still needed to find out for sure, and for that, they needed DNA from the man himself. This is when the detectives contacted Joe, and they planned to let Joe know that his DNA didn't match the killer's, so now they wanted his DNA to confirm that he could be officially ruled out as a suspect. Luckily, and finally, Joe agreed and gave his DNA, and when this was tested, it was not a match to the killer's DNA. So it wasn't Joe who ended Katie's life, even though his actions and stories were choppy. When Joe was asked about his reluctance to give his DNA to the police, he said he knew that he and Katie had gotten intimate hours prior, so he thought that the police would find his DNA on her and pin him as the killer. And while this was a serious letdown for Katie's family to hear, you can't really fault the guy. That was a very honest assessment for him to have made, and he may have dodged a bullet there. But even though this is terrifying to be framed for a crime, Because of Joe's reluctance, 3 long months had passed since any progress was seen in Katie's investigation. If only Joe had been forthcoming from the get-go, Katie's case wouldn't have proceeded at such a snail's pace. So Joe wasn't the killer, which meant that the investigators had to get back to looking for the actual perpetrator. They now believed that Katie's killer was most likely a stranger. With the DNA, the detectives were able to obtain the ethnicity of the killer, and it was concluded that the wrongdoer was probably a Hispanic male. Also, if you remember, there were tire tracks found where Katie's body was, and according to the police, they belonged to a pickup truck. So the killer was most likely Hispanic. He most likely drove a pickup truck. And this was something the police could go off of, but it was still pretty vague. The investigators were going through lead after lead, checking all the known offenders in the area, and Katie's family even put out a reward of $100,000 for any information on Katie, but sadly, nothing came up. Katie's mom, Jan, at one point started to lose all hope of ever getting justice for her daughter, and she held on to her will and didn't want Katie's case to go cold. The Sepich family did whatever they could to keep the case on the forefront of people's minds, but just like that, 3 long years had passed. But time had brought Katie's parents some sort of hope, because in December of 2006, a DNA match popped up. See, the killer's DNA was sent to the CODIS database, and at that time there wasn't a match. But 3 years later, CODIS reached out to the Las Cruces Police Department and gave them some amazing news for the first time in a very long time. So who was this person that had the same DNA as Katie's killer? Well, it was a 27-year-old named Gabriel Avila. Luckily, this man was already in prison in 2006 for aggravated burglary and assault, but this conviction was the reason why his DNA was fed into CODIS. Gabriel committed this crime 3 months after Katie's attack. He broke into a house armed with a knife, and he had plans to rob the place and even attack the woman who lived there. Luckily, he didn't know that the woman also had a roommate, and when the woman heard the commotion of Gabriel breaking in, well, he panicked and fled the scene. He was eventually caught by the police, but he was let out on bond, and as soon as he got out, Gabriel went on the run. He managed to stay under the radar for about 14 months before he was rearrested and convicted for the crime he tried to commit in November of 2003. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison for the charges. So this was the man whose DNA matched Katie's killer. As he was still in custody, the police wanted to get to know a little bit more about Gabriel to build a case against him. Well, the investigators found out that Gabriel was married at one point, although the couple had gotten divorced. The detectives wanted to meet his ex-wife and see if they could get any information about Gabriel and where he was on the night of August 30th. The police located the woman and were surprised to know that Gabriel did own a pickup truck in 2003, around the time that Katie's attack took place. But the smoking gun was something that Gabriel's then wife found in the cup holder of the truck. It was a diamond ring. It was the ring Joe gifted to Katie that she wore all the time. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but when Katie's body was found, there was no ring on her finger. Even her parents pointed out that she wore it all the time, and yet it wasn't on her when her body was found. Gabriel had taken the ring for whatever sick reason, but it aided in the detectives' investigation. This next bit is going to sound like it's made up, but trust me, it is not. Gabriel's ex-wife still had that ring in her possession 3 years after the fact. She thought that Gabriel was cheating on her, and I think at this point she probably wished he had been, because the real story behind the ring was far more gruesome. This was the single most damning piece of evidence that linked Gabriel to Katie's murder. The woman handed the ring over to the police, and now officers knew that they had to have an overdue chat with Gabriel. Gabriel was currently held in prison in New Mexico, and when the investigators asked him about Katie Sepich, he initially feigned ignorance. The police expected that much, and then they decided to charge straight in and show Gabriel the ring. It was as if Gabriel's whole demeanor changed when he saw the ring, and he knew that he couldn't keep up the ruse any longer, and he eventually confessed to the horrific crime. According to Gabriel, Katie was a stranger to him. On the night of August 30th, Gabriel was driving around in his pickup truck when he almost collided with someone walking on the street. That someone was tragically 22-year-old Katie, and that was how their paths crossed. Gabriel asked Katie if she needed a ride home, to which she refused and kept walking. That should have been the end, but sadly it wasn't. Seeing a young, vulnerable, and lone woman in the middle of the night sparked something very terrible and dark in Gabriel, and he followed her home. As soon as Katie reached home and realized she'd forgotten her keys at the party, she decided to break into her own home from the bedroom window. Gabriel witnessed while this was happening, and that was when he leaped at the opportunity. It was an opportunity that would tragically end in murder. Gabriel crept up behind Katie and pinned her to the ground. This was when Katie fought for her life. She used all of her strength to fight Gabriel off and even managed to scratch him. But sadly, Gabriel had an advantage over Katie. He was much bigger than her, and soon he overpowered her, forced himself on her, and then ended her life. When asked why he didn't just let her go after he got what he wanted, Gabriel simply said that he was afraid she would have gone to the police. After this, he loaded Katie's body into his truck, took her to the landfill, and dumped her there, setting all the evidence on fire. Gabriel thought that the fire would erase all the evidence of the crime, but sometime after Gabriel left, the flames extinguished, either because of the wind or maybe there wasn't enough accelerant, but regardless, Gabriel's plans went down the drain unbeknownst to him, and this was the very thing that led to his downfall. After Gabriel's confession, he was charged with the assault and murder of Katie Sepich on December 26th of 2006, and he pleaded guilty. The jury sentenced Gabriel Avila to 69 years in prison, which he had to serve after the 9 years for the burglary and conviction that he was also being charged for. He's still alive today and is currently incarcerated at Lea County Correctional Facility, a medium security prison in Hobbs, New Mexico. DNA is a crucial piece of evidence in solving any crime like this, and thanks to it, Katie's case was brought to completion. But it was 3 years too late, and during that time, not only was an innocent man, who is still a scumbag, grilled by the police, but the actual perpetrator tried to commit another crime, although he was unsuccessful this time around. Katie's family was relieved after the sentencing, but they still felt as though something needed to be done to ensure that felons don't get away with crimes just because their DNA isn't in a database. Following Gabriel's sentencing, the Sepich family petitioned for the implementation of a new law called the Katie Sepich Enhanced DNA Collection Act of 2010, or simply Katie's Law. This law was advocated by Katie's parents to ensure timely use of DNA and modern technology for catching criminals. The law proposed DNA collection of people who are arrested, charged with, or indicted for violent crimes like assaults, murders, stalking, kidnapping, and abduction. The law also stressed using DNA samples to make profiles to help arrest and convict perpetrators on time, giving the families peace and closure while also preventing said perpetrator from harming anyone else. The governor of New Mexico at the time, Susana Martinez, who was also the prosecutor in Katie's case, signed the bill into law in April of 2011. In hindsight, the passing of Katie's law is Katie's legacy, and her family is at peace knowing that Katie is still remembered to this day. This was not Katie's or her family's anticipation when she said she wanted to do something big or change the world, but sadly, her chance encounter with a stranger forever altered the course of her life. Katie's family misses her terribly, and there's not a day that goes by when her parents, siblings, and friends don't remember her smile and her eyes filled with light and hope. We can only hope that with Gabriel's sentencing, the Sepich family found some sort of closure, even though nothing in the world could fill the void that Katie left behind. This case was so unsettling. To think that a stranger can get provoked within seconds and do the unthinkable is just so terrifying. Katie and Gabriel didn't even know each other, but it didn't stop Gabriel, not just a stranger, but a cruel, heartless, and revolting monster, from defiling and stealing the life of an innocent young woman. Katie's life hadn't really even started yet, but just like that, Gabriel took it upon himself to end it. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of True Crime Stories. I wanted to give a special thank you to a couple channel members, including Cindy Matthews and Kaza B. If you also want to become a member of the channel, you gain access to new videos sometimes days or weeks before they're uploaded to the public. It's currently the best way you can help the channel and support us. I really appreciate all of you that have decided to do that. If you want to join, you can click that big join button below the video, or find the link down in the description. But as always, if you enjoyed this video, check out this other interesting case I covered, and don't forget to subscribe. It's totally free and just keeps you up to date with all my future videos. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.